Okay, so let's jump right into our next caller then. I believe this is Itto in Arkansas. Let's talk to Itto. If I can click on the link. Come on. I can do this. Hello, Itto, can you hear us?
Hi, V, how are you?
I am doing good. How
Hello?
are you doing? Hi, can you hear us?
Good. Hi, Shannon. Yes. Hi, how are you guys?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm so delighted that finally I get to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm delighted too.
Yeah, what can we help you with today?
So I am an atheist. I am totally blind. So if it's okay for you guys, I would start with like a brief summary of my background. Where did I come from? So that when we go to the topic, it will be clearer to why I hold the views that I do, and how did they come to become an atheist, and how I told the screen to the callers that I want to talk about disability and Abrahamic religions. I didn't want to pick one in general, basically. And I'm so happy that Shannon, as a psychologist, is here so that she could give her opinion on this. So my name is Itto-AK, and I was born and raised in Morocco in the Atlas Mountains. And Morocco, according to the rules, is a Muslim country. So, but my father was a Jewish descendant, and my mother is an Arab Muslim. So I was raised with my dad's family, like mixed of Jewish and some ancient religions, like praying to the fire and all of that. I was not born blind, and when I was 12, I moved to my mom's family, where I was introduced to Islam, but I never went to school to learn how to read and write. I didn't even know how to count, like from 1 to 3. I didn't even know like my name, because they would call me under like my father's daughter or my mother's daughter. My parents died when I was little, so I suffered a lot. Of course, I gave that credit to God for a while, to Allah. So I started school for the first time at the age of 17. I'm 31, and I started from the 7th grade, and I was homeless for 6 years, and I suffered. And anyone and everyone who is listening, and you guys as well, because it's going to take forever to tell the whole story, could look up my name, Itto-AK, and they will find everything. So I worked so hard, and I graduated with my bachelor degree, and I got my master. I got the Fulbright scholarship, being the first female with disability in what's so-called Arab world, to get the Fulbright. And I came here to the United States, to Arkansas, and I studied master's in journalism. And I ended up seeking asylum under persecution that I was going to experience in Morocco. Like I was hiding under Islam, like I faked it. I was singing it like to myself, but praying 5 times. So the reason I'm calling is like Abrahamic religions and their relation to like disability. Of course, psychologically speaking, it's really hard for a disabled person to, do the, like, accept the fact, like, how society views us as a disabled people. And, like, despite of all my accomplishments, like how I'm familiar a lot with the Quran. I visited Christianity, by the way, for a while. I thought, love everyone, love your neighbor. I'm like, whoa, this is really cool. But when I went deep into it, I'm like, oh, no, that's just another version of whatever. It's the personal God. So, like how disability in Islam, they say, like, you're less human being because you're disabled. That was psychologically damaging to me, especially when I was homeless and, like, I was raped and I had to go through abortions and all of it. When I did my asylum, I became public since last May about the fact that I am an atheist and I don't believe in any God. Not because of my suffering or what I had to go through. Maybe that's psychologically, again, maybe that's true, but because of my reading and that I am a Fulbright scholar and I've read a lot, I've done a lot of research. So how, even in the Bible, in the Old Testament, like they said that Mary, Aaron's sister, she was disabled for a while. God gave her kind of a break.
Right.
that, hey, if you don't believe in me, I'm going to punish you. So I posted on the Facebook groups for atheists of Austin, and I am hoping that we can bring the topic of like disability and how a disabled person can face society, like the social norms of the fact that, yeah, you're disabled, you're less human being, how to see that as like, yeah, I'm disabled. There's a lot of factors. Like for me, it was my uncle's wife who blinded me. She threw a sharp utensil into my face and exploded my eye. So, but there are people who are born disabled and or people who have, car accidents or something. So I would love to hear what you guys have to say about the Abrahamic religion and how the disabled communities or disabled people are being used on, the religious organizations such as mosques, churches. I don't know much about temples.
Yes. Itto, thank you so much for calling in. That's an amazing story.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry that you had to go through what you did, but it sounds like you came out the other side so much stronger and so inspiring, honestly. So thank you for sharing that. In regards to disability and religion, I think that it is a way too under discussed topic. I think we should be talking a lot more about how we as a society, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, or secular, view disability and how we let that influence how we see the other person. I think that it probably does stem very deeply from religion and from the idea that there is a moral implication to how well you function or how standardly you function. For me, I would only feel comfortable telling you my experience as somebody who was raised a non-denominational Christian. I could not tell you what the Jewish view of this is, or expound deeply on the Muslim view of this, but I would be happy to share kind of how disability was talked about in my family as the child of a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the Old Testament, which is what the Christians call the Jewish Bible, is it did put this onus on kind of the morality of disability, of illness, of any kind of physical or mental struggle. It was usually, at least the stories that I was told and the way that they were interpreted, was either a punishment for something that you had done or a test to test if you were true to the God, right? So Job would be an example of somebody who was tested with various illnesses, various physical disabilities in order to test whether or not he really was God's best believer. Whereas some of the generals and some of the captains of various armies throughout all of the, I don't know exact names, but there have been ones that were cursed, right? With various illnesses because they refused an order from God or because they interpreted God's message in a way that wasn't accurate or something. So there was a lot of moral onus on disability and just pain in general and the inability to function as they thought you should. New Testament, it feels very much like the people who were suffering from some kind of illness or disability were used as props, right? There wasn't that moral implication as much anymore. There were people who were good people who believed in God, who were still suffering, who were still struggling, and their only purpose was to prove that Jesus was doing miracles, right? So the woman who was bleeding for 7 years, or the daughter of the Pharisee who died, or the servant of the Roman centurion, they were all people who were suffering and who had an illness. But it wasn't because they were bad. It was because they needed to give Jesus the ability to save them, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how I looked at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but isn't Jesus the same God that was copied and pasted into like being the Son of God? Like, did God change his mind like from the Old Testament? Because the Quran, which I am very familiar with, in Morocco we were not Like, we were not allowed to have any other religious text besides the Quran. But when I came here to America 3 years ago, I started reading the Bible and listening to you guys, and I've learned a lot. Is basically the Old Testament is just a copy of the Quran. It's just Muhammad was too tired to do the whole thing because it's too big for him. So, yeah.
That's funny. I've never heard that before. First, I want to say thank you for calling. Your experience it is amazing and awe-inspiring, and I'm so sorry you went through all that, and I appreciate you sharing the story, knowing that it's going to reach other people, and I hope people do look you up and can learn from you and your experience. So thank you for that. And I don't know if you're familiar with what I do on my channel that's just called Shannon Q, but one of the things that I tackle quite frequently is something called Christian counseling. And every denomination is going to be different. Every religious person is going to be different in their perceptions towards things, but there's large swaths of people and organizations that look at physical and mental disabilities as generational curses. So they point towards these things as evidence of, sin in a family, for example, that goes all the way back. It's all a method to keep people reliant on a church in order to get support and in order to feel accepted. Because if the message that you're receiving from even your own community is that you are insufficient unless you have us to pray over you, you are going to be less likely to abandon that practice because you become reliant on the other people for emotional, physical support, which is a form of abuse in my mind. It's an absolute form of abuse. You're forming an artificial dependency that's based on lying to people about who they are and how they got that way. And a lot of it has to do, I think, with the fact that when these books were written, people didn't really have as much of an understanding or any understanding really of mental illnesses or the role that the brain plays in your physiology just in general. And they didn't have as much or really any way of understanding what leads to physiological ailments and disabilities. So they viewed it through the lens that it was some sort of divine punishment. And because those books were written at that time and so many people don't contextualize it based on the culture in which it was written and look at it as a divine and inspired word of God, it's not malleable to them. They're not able to comport it to existent reality. And they still see things as soul issues, for example. I really hate it when people say that this is a soul issue, because you're removing the assessment of what's happening to you physiologically, and you're not even addressing the actual problem. You're addressing a non-issue while allowing the problem to fester. And it happens far too much, and there's not enough people speaking out about it, because religion seems to have this immunity to criticism, that when you criticize the religion in its practices that are detrimental, you're seen as somebody who is who's dishonest or who's hateful or who wants to be bigoted against a group. And they shroud themselves in that immunity and are allowed to continue abusive practices. And unfortunately, people like you and many, many others end up being victimized for far too long as a result. So the more voices that we have pointing to it, saying, hey, this is wrong, the better chance we have to save more people. So thank you for adding your voice. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much for calling in.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys. And I hope that all other people with disability would feel courageous to come. It took me 28 years to come out. So I hope that other people would feel more comfortable to come out, so that we are disabled, but still we can achieve a lot of things and do what other people can do. Of course, we have limits, but that doesn't define us. So
I love that. And talking about it like this, calling in, is a great first step to help more people come out.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you. Thanks for the good work.
Okay. Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day. Wow. Inspirational.
Right?